Hey guys, welcome to my legal classes. This is Ganesh Pujari and we were discussing essentials of valid contract, under which we were discussing free consent, and we have already discussed coercion as a topic in detail, and in this video I am going to discuss undue influence as a second important element under free consent. So I have named this video as video 3B because all of them are going along with free consent. Why to waste time? Let's get into the section 16. Don't worry looking at this slide which looks very busy because I have brought the entire section 16 along with illustration in this particular slide, and in my next slide I have made them all very easy. The subclause 1 says if one party between the two parties of contract has the ability to induce another party because of the dominating position it has, and if it uses such position to obtain an unfair advantage, then the same is called as undue influence. What is that you need to remember? There are two parties, and among the two parties one has the ability to induce the another party. And how can that induce? Because of the dominating position it has, and if it uses such dominating position to obtain an unfair advantage, in that case it is called as undue influence. Subclause 2 discusses about two important situations where there is presence of undue influence. One, if one party holds a real or apparent authority, and the second being the mental capacity of the one party, which may be temporarily or permanently affected because of various reasons like age, illness, mental or bodily distresses. Subclause 3 discusses about burden of proof. Now, who has the burden to prove? It is always the dominating party which has to prove that there is no undue influence utilized. There are four beautiful illustrations, first being father and son. Now, father spends some money for his minor son, and he also comes to a bond with his son saying that the son will pay back some greater amount when he attains the majority. Now here father is misusing his parental influence, that is undue influence, so the contract is not valid. In the second case, if a deceased person or a aged person is made to pay some unreasonable sum to a medical attendant, that is not valid because medical attendant is using his undue influence on the deceased or aged person. In the third case, there is a village where a person has taken money from a money lender and he wants little more money, so he goes and asks money with the money lender, and money lender comes to a fresh contract or he gives a fresh loan with some unreasonable conditions, and that is called undue influence because he is in a dominating position and he is utilizing such power for his benefit. The last case where there is a banker and a person is going to bank for a loan, and at that particular time the market has stringent of money. Now the banker is asking for high rate of interest. Unless and until it is too high, the contract is valid, but if the banker is utilizing the situation for his benefit and charges very high interest, then that can be a case of undue influence. In a nutshell, if you want to know the meaning of undue influence under section 16, it can be when an individual is able to dominate the will of the other person due to the relationship between the two parties and persuade another's decision to obtain an unfair advantage. There are three major requirements. The first being there should be two parties in which one party should have the position to dominate the will of the other, and secondly, such dominating party should use its position, and thirdly, it should use its position for gaining unfair advantage over the other. When all these three happens, that is called undue influence. In few relationships, there is already pre-assumption available that there can be undue influences. Now for those presumption, I am giving both circumstances as well as examples, and in my next slide I am giving case laws. The first circumstances can be a real or apparent authority over the other can cause undue influence, and the examples can be parent and child, master and servant, and tax authority and its assessees. The second circumstances can be when one party stands in a fiduciary or beneficial relation to other. In this case, the examples can be spiritual or religious gurus will have the undue influence over the disciples, and then there can be trustee and beneficiaries and solicitors and clients and guardians and wards. The third circumstances can be mental capacity of a person is temporarily or permanently affected by reason of age, illness or mental or bodily distress. Now the example for that can be relationship between medical attendant and ward. And there are few other relationship where there is no presumption of undue influence. For example, landlord and tenant, creditor and debtor, and husband and wife. Now let us try understand case laws for all the three circumstances where there is presumption of undue influence. Out of three circumstances, the first circumstance is real or apparent authority utilized for undue influence. I am discussing two interesting case laws, the first being Ramachandar versus Sital Prasad. What happened here? There was a father and daughter, and this daughter was married. She, instead of staying with her husband, was living with her father at his home along with her illicit partner. Now, this illicit partner influenced her father so much that he gifted all his property to him. Now, this is a case of undue influence and such contract is voidable. The second case law is Inche Noria versus Sheikh Ali bin Omar. In this case, what happened? There was a old illiterate lady and a nephew of her managed all the property, and this lady gifted all her property to nephew, which is a beautiful case of undue influence by her nephew. The second circumstances is fiduciary relationship. Whenever there is fiduciary relationship, there can be undue influence, which is what held in the case of Takri Devi versus Ramadogra. An old illiterate lady gifted her property to her advocate and it was held voidable. The second case law, Rani Annapurni versus Swaminatha, where a needy poor widow to fight her maintenance case took a loan from a money lender and he charged 100% rate of interest. Now he has misused his position and it was held that it is undue influence and the rate of interest was brought down to 24%. The third circumstances is mental capacity temporarily or permanently affected. For that, the case law is Manu Singh versus Umadat Pandey, where an old Hindu gave all his property to his spiritual leader and it was held that the spiritual leader has the position to use undue influence, so the contract is voidable. Who has the burden to prove? The dominating party has the burden to prove that there was no utilization of undue influence, and he can do the same by producing sufficient evidence on the consideration given as well as the timeline given to consult with others before finalizing the contract. That is how he can prove that there was no misutilization or there was no undue influence utilized. This is the last part of the presentation, which is all about section 19A. Section 19A of the Act discusses about power to set aside contract induced by undue influence. Now, when consent to an agreement is caused by undue influence, the agreement is a contract voidable. Remember, it is a contract voidable at the option of what? At the option of the party whose consent was so caused. Now, in my example, I quoted father and son. Now, it is the option of son to make such contract as a voidable contract. Now, if he has no issues, then they can definitely continue with such contract. Only when son feels that it is not okay, he can put a case and such contract will become contract voidable. That is what you need to remember, and there are two illustrations given in the Act. You can please go through the same. That brings an end to the concept of undue influence. In my next video, I am going to discuss on fraud and misrepresentation. All the very best for whatsoever purpose you are watching my videos. Please subscribe my channel. Please like, share and comment my videos. And thank you so much for watching me.